Good evening, everyone. Tonight, it is my distinct honor to introduce the Honorable Federico Pena as our guest speaker. Mr. Pena is an accomplished individual who has experience in both the public and private sectors. His experiences with leadership span a variety of disciplines and arenas. Mr. Pena graduated with his JD from the University of Texas and has practiced law and served in the Colorado legislature. He currently serves as a senior advisor of the Colorado Impact Fund and for the private equity firm Vestor Capital Partners, which has offices in New York, Denver, and Boston. He also serves on the board of directors of Wells Fargo and Sonic Corporation. He was instrumental in the creation and implementation of the Latino Leadership Institute here at the University of Denver, Daniels College of Business. He is also an active member of the Board of Trustees at the university. Locally, Mr. Pena has dedicated much of his work to the public sector. Mr. Pena served as mayor of Denver from 1983 to 1991. During this time, he spearheaded the rebuilding, relocation, and development of Denver International Airport and greatly expanded the public transit system. Because of his contributions to DIA and the public transit system, the city of Denver honored Mr. Pena by naming Pena Boulevard and the Pena Light Rail stop after him. Nationally, Mr. Pena has served in 2 cabinet positions in the Clinton administration as Secretary of Department and Secretary of the Department of Transportation. Pena was a national co-chair of Obama for America in 2008 and 2012, as well as the national board member for the Obama-Biden transition. We're humbled to have him here with us tonight to share some insights into his leadership journey. Please join me in welcoming the renowned and inspiring leader, the Honorable Federico Pena.
Thank you very much. First of all, can I just congratulate all of you for looking so great? As I walked in, I said, why is everybody dressed up? This is not your typical college group. And I was informed by a couple of the young men here in the front that you were asked to do business casual or something like that. So I'm honored that you dressed up. So thank you for that. Can I thank Emily for all your work, Emily? And the director of the program, Paul. I understand all of you know him in the front row. Paul, thank you very much for organizing this and for inviting me to be here. Now, I asked Paul many, many months ago how I should present myself tonight. And he said, well, it might be helpful if you talk a little bit about your background, which I really don't like to do, to be honest. I'm one of these people who don't like to talk about myself, but I will force myself. I'll do it. Because I think it'll be helpful for all of you to get a sense of who I am and what my background is so you can better understand my journey. Because if you were to have asked me when I was a young man, being raised in Brownsville, Texas. Anybody know where Brownsville is? Very good. Some Texans? Dallas. Okay. Where else? What? Lubbock. All right. Anybody from South Texas? No South Texans. Well, the reason I say that is you have to put yourself, or I would ask you to put yourself in my position as a young man in Brownsville, Texas, a long time ago. And back then, the little town of Brownsville, Texas had a population of 35,000 people. My father was a small businessman, a very conservative businessman, by the way. My mother and my father had 6 children. I was the 3rd oldest in the family, but my mother made the extraordinary judgment of having triplets after I was born. So if you can imagine, and some of you someday are going to get married and have kids, imagine having 6 children in a period of 7.5 years. So you can imagine what my mother did. She stayed at home and raised us. But what they taught us was integrity. My father was a man of integrity. He believed that your name and how you held yourself in the broader community was very, very important. He was a very principled gentleman. He taught us to believe in ourselves. And why do I say that? And I know some of you are from many different states, but let me explain that. So imagine if you're being raised in this really tiny, tiny town in South Texas. And by the way, if you look at the United States, South Texas is the southernmost city in Texas. So the Rio Grande starts here in Colorado, goes through New Mexico, then goes through El Paso, which is the border between Texas and Mexico, and empties into my hometown. So for me, as a young man in Brownsville, Texas, which by the way was 90% Latino, and to this day, if you go down there today and you listen to radio stations, 90% of the radio stations are in Spanish. It's a border town. That part of Texas used to be part of Mexico before the Mexican-American War of 1848, and then before that, part of Spain. So my history goes back many, many decades to that kind of a culture and that kind of environment in a very tiny town. So there I am in Brownsville, Texas, and when I looked at the rest of the state of Texas, and for those of you who are Texas, you know how big Texas is, it's huge, right? I thought that Austin, Texas, where I eventually was going to go to college, was like another country. And the dream of ever going out of state to University of Denver or to some other college was like going to Mars. I went to a Catholic school, all boys, graduated with 50 students, and then I applied to the University of Texas. Now I want to confess, and I mentioned this to Paul earlier, I am a terrible test taker. Any bad? No, you're all good test takers. Oh, a few honest people up here, right? I'm a terrible test taker. And so when I took these tests, I had good grades in high school, but my test scores were so low that people wondered whether I could get into the University of Texas, but somehow I got in. So I show up in Austin, Texas in 1964. I've given you my age. And at that time, of a student body of 35,000 students, the ethnic and racial minority composition of the school was, guess, what percent? 1/2 of 1%, 0.5. And so I remember as a young man walking through this huge, enormous campus, I didn't know a soul. And I was very nervous about trying to talk to people. I took my first English composition theme class and was told by the professor that that was the course that was used to drop out 30% of the freshman class, or some large number. And I thought I was a pretty good English composition writer. So I turned in my first English composition theme, and I got back from my professor a little note at the very top. It said C+. And next to the grade was written, "Not bad for a South Texas boy." I thought it was a compliment. It took me years later to finally realize I'm not sure that was a real compliment. So that was University of Texas. And then I wanted to go to law school. No one in my entire extended family of hundreds of relatives and family members have ever gone to law school. So I applied to the University of Texas. I took the LSAT, and of course I bombed it. And so when I went to see the assistant dean, he said, "You can't be admitted because we predict, based on your LSAT score, that you will never pass the coursework. And if for some reason you pass the coursework and you graduate, you won't pass the bar exam. And therefore you'll never be a lawyer, and you'll be occupying a seat of someone else for whom we predict, based on their LSAT score, that they will be successful." And I went back and back week after week, and I just bugged him and bugged him and bugged him. I said, I really want to come to law school. No one in my entire family has ever gone, this is my dream. And finally, about a month before school was going to start, they were letting the last few members of the law school, and he let me in. I worked hard, didn't make great grades, but I graduated, took the bar exam, passed it, became a civil rights lawyer. My original intention was to become a business lawyer. But back in the 60s, I was moved by Dr. Martin Luther King and Cesar Chavez and John Kennedy, who asked not what your country could do for you, but what you could do for your country. And that motivated me to get into public service and to become a civil rights lawyer. I moved to Colorado. I started suing school districts for racial discrimination, police departments, major institutions that I believe were discriminating against a powerless group of people. And then around 1975, as a young lawyer, I helped draft the first bilingual bicultural education law for the state of Colorado. I testified. By the way, I know this is being videotaped. That's okay. I had a ponytail. Can you imagine a ponytail? Blue jeans, torn shirt. That was a look back then, right? Although it's coming back, I think. And testified, the bill got passed. And after that, a group of legislators came to me and said, you know, Federico, you did a pretty good job. You're a lawyer, you're articulate, you're smart. You work well with people. Why don't you run for the state legislature? I said, who, me? I'm not even from Colorado. They said, well, there's a vacant seat in Northwest Denver. Anybody here live around, you know where Northwest Denver is? The Highlands area, that area? So I had to move into that district and establish residency, which I did. My opponent had lived in the district for 20 years. Everybody knew him, and I basically outworked him. I went door to door for about 5 or 6 months. I met everybody in the district. People would tell me, we've never seen a candidate come to my door. This is the first, this is new for us, and I won the election. So I served as a freshman in the Colorado State Legislature. Someone paid attention. The Denver Post identified me as the top 10 legislators that session, which was unusual for a freshman. When I was reelected, the Democrats, I'm a Democrat, came up to me and said, listen, we'd like for you to be the leader of the Democratic Party in the House. They made me the leader. The gentleman I defeated left the Democratic Party, became a Republican. It's another story. And then I served 2 terms because my view of public service was it wasn't a lifetime job. I was a lawyer. I wanted to go back and practice law with my young brother, who, by the way, went to the University of Denver School of Law. He graduated here. And so he and I had a private practice together. And so after 4 years, I said, that's plenty of time. And then I announced my retirement from the legislature. And some friends of mine took me to a Mexican restaurant on Federal Boulevard and gave me a lot of beer. And they said, you should run for mayor of Denver. And I said, are you guys crazy? I was 36 years old. And the incumbent was a gentleman named Mayor McNichols, who'd been in office for 14 years. His brother had been governor of Colorado. His father had been city auditor of the city, and he himself had been a mayor for 14 years. He had a lot of money in the bank. He had a 99% name recognition. I had like a 0.5% of name recognition. And I thought, how can I possibly do this? But I went back and I relied on the values and the principles that my parents taught me. Believe in yourself. If you have a passion for something, go for it. Aim high. Work hard. And if you present yourself in a responsible way, people will relate to that. And so I ran. And I was the dark horse candidate. Literally. There were 7 candidates who ran. 3 of them were members of Governor Lamb's cabinet. So I was up against some really tough people. The night before the election, one of the reporters called me. I won't mention his name, don't want to embarrass him. And he asked me, Federico, how do you think you're going to do tomorrow in the primary election? I said, well, I think we're going to come in first. And there was silence on the phone. And he says, we have you coming in 5th. Well, I came in first. And went off to win the runoff election. But my campaign theme, which people talk about today, most of you are not from Denver, was imagine a great city. That was my campaign theme. It wasn't imagine a good city or imagine a cool city. Imagine a great city. So I was asking the people of Denver to use their imaginations and to think what more our city could become if we worked hard, aimed high, and did some extraordinary things. So I served for 8 years as mayor. About a year after I was elected, we went into the worst recession in the history of the city and county of Denver. Our unemployment rate was 2% above the national average. Our vacancy rate of Class A office space in downtown Denver was 31%. 1/3 of the buildings were empty. in downtown Denver. If you go downtown today in Lodo, all those people, they didn't exist when I was mayor. It was empty. People would go home after 5 o'clock, hardly any stores, things were collapsing. And so we had to go to work. We had to put together a strategy of investment, believing in the things we could do as a city, and we worked very, very hard for 8 years. We got a lot done. And the good news is that every subsequent mayor since I've been elected have sort of built on the work of each other, just like I built on the work of my predecessor. I wasn't one of those mayors who came in and said, well, even though I defeated Mayor McNichols, I didn't say, well, everything he did was wrong, we're going to stop everything. I said, no, he did a lot of good things, and we're going to build on that. And every mayor since I left office has done the same. And voila, today, this city is recognized as one of the most extraordinary, exciting, growing, bustling cities in America. And that is because of people who had a vision, they worked hard, they believed in themselves, and they found a way to bring in the broader community to help accomplish these very difficult tasks. And let me give you an example, just to give you a sense of what, and by the way, I didn't ask you this, but how many of you were born before 1983? A couple of hands up here. So I want to have to give you a little history to put this in context, because when you drive around the city and you see things, you might ask the question, how did that happen? Well, mention was made of the airport, and I'm going to talk about that in great detail because there's lessons of leadership on building one of the world's largest airports. We built a new convention center. I'm going to talk about the failure that I experienced in my initial view of building a convention center. We created the Scientific and Cultural Facilities District, which raises money to support all the cultural facilities in the entire metropolitan area, whether it's a Denver Museum or Natural History Museum, all those. We rebuilt the downtown library. Light rail started. And by the way, you may not know this, when RTD, the Regional Transportation District, completes the entire light rail build-out, the light rail system in Denver Metro will be the largest light rail system in America by miles. That's how big we thought about the future of our city. Lower Downtown District, I'm going to talk about that. If you go down now to Toledo, back when I was mayor, they were abandoned buildings. People were tearing them down. All these beautiful old brick buildings were tearing them down and turning them into parking lots. And I said, no. So we passed a historic bill creating a multi-29 block historic district, passed by one vote in city council. The result is that's now some of the hottest property in the entire state. And if you go down to Lodo today, you now understand the transformation of where it was back when I was mayor and where it is today. We brought a baseball team to Denver. Coors Field was built. And the entire Central Platte Valley, and I know you don't know what I'm referring to when I refer to the Central Platte Valley, but when you go down to Confluence Park and lower downtown, there's a whole stretch of land which is now developed into condos and restaurants and shops. All of that was empty. Imagine 600 acres of empty wasteland except for a railroad track that went through it. That's now all developed. Took 30 years, but we started that effort. The Denver Art Museum expansion, the Cherry Creek Shopping Center was completely redone under my administration. We passed a bond issue for all that, a new Bronco Stadium, et cetera. And I'm going to talk about some of those things because I think it's important to understand what is required to lead in a time of stress. Mayor Hancock, who is our current mayor, is a good friend of mine. By the way, Mayor Hancock, as a young man, was an intern for me when I was mayor. He says a lot of nice things about me, and I appreciate that. He and I were having lunch today. I said, Michael, you're so lucky. You've got a booming economy. People are coming in. Things are, this is a great time to be mayor. He says, I remember the days when you were mayor. And things were a lot tougher. But I want to talk about that because it really calls into question one's leadership skills during times of stress. When things are going well in your life or in business or in your family or whatever, it's not so hard, still challenging to be a leader, but when times are tough and people are criticizing you, and back then we had 2 newspapers in this city, both of whom used me as a ping pong. I got used to it. It's much more difficult. And where did you go, Michael? Where's Michael? Did he walk out? Well, after that, I went to Washington, D.C. I was Secretary of Transportation for 4 years, Secretary of Energy for 1.5 years, came back, got into business, and the rest has been discussed. And I'm happy to talk about my work in Washington, D.C., if you'd like to talk about that. What are the reflections about leadership? By the way, I want to be very clear. I have never taken a leadership class. Sorry. Continuous improvement, right? That's what it's all about. But let me share from my own experience, excuse me, I have a little cough, 10 reflections on what I view as leadership. Number 1, be passionate about what you are doing. Have a passion. My passion was to help the powerless. My passion was first to be a civil rights lawyer and then to be a civil servant. I could have gone out and made a lot of money as a lawyer, decided not to do that. That was my passion. Have a vision on where you want to go. My vision was, as mayor, imagine a great city. Bless you. Surround yourself with people who are smarter than you. People to this day talk about the fact that I brought in people a little older than you are. Some of my advisors were 26, 27, 28 years old. They were young people, very, very bright, and they challenged me. I wasn't afraid to surround myself with people who were a lot smarter than I was. Some leaders are afraid to do that. They don't want to be challenged. I welcomed it. Be willing to make changes quickly. My big problem was I had trouble firing people. I was not Donald Trump. Ooh, touched a nerve there. But seriously, I have trouble firing people. And I give people second chances and third chances. And sometimes that's the wrong thing to do as a leader. Sometimes when you recognize a situation is not working or a person is not working, you have to make a very tough decision and make a change. That's a weakness of mine. Listen to people around you. I listen to my constituents. I listen to business people. I listen to labor. I listen to the broader community in the city and county of Denver in ways that perhaps others had not done. Don't compromise your values or principles, but be willing to make some small adjustments. Let me give you an example. So when I was elected mayor in 1983, we had, and we still do, one of the largest St. Patrick's Day parades in the country. Some of you have gone down to see it. And the tradition was the mayor was always the parade marshal of the St. Patrick's Day parade, and I was looking forward to being the parade marshal. Unfortunately, back then, and put yourself back in 1983, if you can. It's a long, long time ago. The gay community wanted to participate in the parade, and they were rejected. They were denied the right to participate in the St. Patrick's Day parade by the leaders of the St. Patrick's Day organization. And I said as mayor, I would not participate in the parade, and I would not be the parade marshal. Because I believed back in 1983 that gays and lesbians had rights that today we sort of acknowledge and accept. I wish I could describe for you the hate mail that I got. My poor assistants who were answering the nasty phone calls, I think, lost their hearing. And for some, I was never forgiven for that decision. But it was a decision based on my values and my principles. And I stuck to them. You in your lives are going to have opportunities to make a very tough decision that most people don't like. Your friends don't like. Your families may not like it. But if you believe in it, leaders stick to their values and principles. Be persistent and tenacious and never give up. I'm going to talk about the airport. Talk about persistence and tenacity. Acknowledge those around you. You know, I get tired of when I listen to some people, I won't mention them, they're in the news lately. They take credit for everything. Leaders don't do that. Leaders think, I want to thank Emily because Emily did all this hard work and people don't often recognize her and she really helped get this project done. Or I want to thank Paul for having the vision and having this leadership. Real leaders acknowledge others and acknowledge the work that others around them help them accomplish in terms of their being the public image of the success. Give credit to others. Be humble and thankful. The leaders that I admire the most are the ones that are humble and thankful. They don't go around boasting. They don't have to. If you're an acknowledged leader, people know who you are and what you've done, and you don't have to beat your chest talking about that. Humility is a good thing. And finally, never be complacent or rest. Yes, I am going to take a leadership class. Never stop learning, never stop doing, never be complacent. Today in business, and I see this all the time in the businesses we invest in, if CEOs and management teams get asleep at the wheel for a year or two, someone else comes, a disruptive technology comes along, or someone else comes along, and all of a sudden that company is out of business. And the same is true in government, the same is true in art, the same is true in whatever you do. You have to constantly be improving on what you are doing. Stay ahead. Let me talk very briefly. How much more time do I have? 5 more minutes? Okay, because I want to give you time to ask questions. I said to Paul, I don't want to speak for 45 minutes. I want to give you time to ask questions. Food for thought. Let me talk about 2 or 3 examples of where I had to really use some leadership skills in succeeding and times when I failed. Denver International Airport. Back in 1983 when I ran for mayor, the accepted wisdom was that we were going to build upon the old Stapleton Airport, which of course doesn't exist anymore. Anybody know where the Stapleton homes are? Okay. That used to be the old airport. The tower's still there. And the idea back then was to expand the airport north over I-70 onto the Rocky Mountain Arsenal. The Rocky Mountain Arsenal just happens to be one of those polluted arsenals in the country where the Army left bombs in the ground, all this kind of stuff. When I became mayor, we got the Denver Regional Council of Governments to support that. The Adams County delegation from Commerce City and Brighton said, no, we oppose it, and you're never going to build it, we're going to sue you. I went back to my office, we celebrated the fact that we won that vote 2-3, and then I thought, they were really angry. So I did something that no other mayor has done. I picked up the phone and I called them and I said, listen, I'd like to come out and talk to you. I'm not asking you to come to Denver. I'm going to go to you in Adams County. Where do you want to meet? Bubba's Restaurant. A very famous restaurant in Adams County. I went to Adams County with one of my assistants. There was only us. I sat down and I said, what are you so afraid of in terms of expanding the airport? He said 2 things. If you build the airport north, the noise is going to bombard Commerce City and Brighton. I said, that's a good point. And number 2, God forbid, if a plane were ever to crash, it's going to crash in our neighborhood. That's another good point. Those are reasonable arguments to make. I would have made them had I been in their shoes. So I said, what do you want to do? I said, move it. How far? Well, it got moved quite a bit. But in exchange for that, I said, if we move it, it's not going to be in Adams County. It's going to be in Denver, which means we have to annex, 50 square miles of your land, which will now be part of the city and county of Denver. And that's going to require a vote of all the people in Adams County, and you have to go out and support the vote. And therein was the essence of the compromise that finally led to the abandonment of Stapleton Airport and the construction of this new airport that was built way out in Kansas. Funny story, Mayor Stapleton in 1929, when he built Stapleton Airport, the media called it Stapleton's Folly. And they said Mayor Stapleton was building Stapleton Airport way out in the boondocks, and that nobody would ever use it, and the airplanes wouldn't land, and it would fail. My idea was called Federico's Folly. Same arguments that were used. I won't describe all the battles that we had in getting $500 million from the federal government, doing the environmental impact statements, getting 2 elections passed, one in Adams County and one in Denver, buying the land, asking people to move their homes. We had to buy a whole area called Eastwood Estates, 500 people, senior citizens who had bought those homes, and that's where they were going to retire, and we had to move them because that's where the airfield was going to be. It was tough. But one of the toughest negotiations I had with it was with the airlines. And I want to tell you the story. The airlines were supportive, in quotes, of the new airport. And they said, we'll support the new airport if you allow us to continue to expand at the old airport. And I said, that's fine. So we built a new concourse at Stapleton. We built more garages and all that stuff for several years. And then as we started making progress on the new airport, getting the environmental impact statement done, getting the money, all that, they said, you know what? We've changed our minds. They came into my office one day, said, you know, we can't support the new airport anymore. I said, wait a minute. For the last 5 or 6 years, you've been telling me you're going to support the airport. We did all these things for you at Stapleton, allowed you to grow and all that. You're not going to support the new airport? I said, okay. I have news for you. Number one, the airport doesn't belong to you. What? No, it belongs to the city. It belongs to the people of Denver. And so because you have changed your mind and broken a promise, this is what I'm going to do for you. I tore up their contract at Stapleton. I put them on a month-to-month lease, which meant I could, with 30 days' notice, terminate their leases at the old Stapleton Airport. They were furious. They couldn't believe that I did that. You can't do that. I said, I just did. These were the CEOs of powerful airlines. I won't mention them. But at some point in your life, you're going to be dealing with very powerful interests and powerful people. And if you're representing a community or your family or your business or whatever it is, you're going to have to make a very tough decision. And I made that tough decision. They walked out of the room very unhappy. We built the airport. Today they love it. Southwest Airlines said they wouldn't fly out of the new airport because it was too expensive. Now, of course, look at their presence. And it's become one of the world's great airports. So story number one. And I can elaborate on that if you'd like a little more. Story number two, Major League Baseball. Completely opposite. Any fans of the Rockies here? Yeah, a few hands. A few hands. I won't ask that question again. So 1983, we believed we should have a Major League Baseball team. We had a professional basketball team. We had a professional football team. We wanted a baseball team. Major League Baseball said to us, no. Denver is not ready for a Major League Baseball team. We said, yes. Yes, we are. So for 8 years, we had exhibition games here. We met with the league owners. We met with Peter Uberoth and all the Major League Baseball executives in New York. And finally, after 8 years, I won't give you all the details, they finally voted to expand 2 teams, one for Denver and one in Florida. But along the way, they said, but we need a baseball-only stadium. We're not going to play baseball at the old Mile High Stadium where the Broncos used to play. So I said, okay. So a young man came up and said, great idea, introduced the bill in the legislature, created a 6-county district and imposed a sales tax. And people voted to increase their sales tax to build Coors Field. However, there was a comma. The tax will not be levied unless Major League Baseball awards the team to Denver. So we went back to New York and said, ta-da! People voted yes. Here's the money. We're going to build you your baseball-only stadium. Where's the team? We got the team. So, success story. Failures. I've talked about Lodo. That's not a failure. That's a great success. When I was first elected mayor, I was riding high. I was elected by 51 to 49. Landslide. But what happens to people when they're elected to a position, you all of a sudden assume that everybody loves you. And that you won the election, and therefore people are going to do what you say. So we said we have to build a new convention center. I said, we should build it in lower downtown next to Union Station, because we could get the land cheaper there. It was going to be a great site. It would be a great injection of energy and investment for lower downtown. And someone said we got to put it on the ballot, let the people of Denver vote, and it failed. People voted against it. I said, what? I was supporting it. I just got elected mayor. Just a few months ago, you elected me mayor. Now you're not. What I didn't realize was I had to go and campaign for it. I had to educate people about why we need a new convention center and how the taxes were going to be used. I took for granted that my popularity, which was very high, by the way, back then, it was very high, was going to be enough to succeed. and it was a dismal failure. And so we had to compromise and build a convention center where it is now in downtown instead of lower downtown. Learned a big lesson. Snow removal. How many mayors have been kicked out of office because of snow removal? A bunch. I won't go through the list. I almost came, in fact, my predecessor, Mayor McNichols, had a 100-year blizzard. He didn't do a very good job, and that hurt him in his election and re-election against me. Well, I had my 100-year blizzard, sure enough. In fact, I had two of them, back to back. So much for 100-year blizzards, right? I had two of them back to back. And the very first one, we're working very hard, and I asked my team, where are all the plows, and where's everybody in the city? How many streets have we cleared? And the gentleman came in with an envelope, and he started writing in the back, well, we've done West 38th, and we've done West. I said, well, don't we have this computerized? He said, no, it's all paper and pen. I said, well, how do you know that we've cleared that street? He says, well, the drivers stop at a 7-Eleven and pick up the phone and call us and tell us they just cleared the street. So we didn't do a very good job. My mistake, again, riding high on my first election, was, bless you, reporters come in and say, Mr. Mayor Pena, how do you think you're doing on snow removal? How would you grade yourself? And I said, I give myself a A. So the next day, all the TV stations ran a survey with the people of Denver. Says the mayor says he made an A on snow removal. What do you think? Of course, the answer was F. Everybody who called in says he's got an F. So I learned that piece about humility and not believing in all the press that you're getting, staying firmly planted to the ground, listening to people very carefully is something you have to constantly do if you're going to be a leader. Whether you're a business leader, you've got to listen to your customers all the time. Don't assume you know what your customers want. Listen to your team members, your employees. What are they doing? What are they wanting your company to do? Listen to the broader public. Don't just assume that because you're the CEO or the student body president, any student body presidents here? That you know everything. You're fair. Keep close to your constituents. Ask them every day, how are we doing? What more can we do? Be a little humble about that and get input from everybody. So let me stop there by concluding this. It's not easy being a leader, particularly when you're facing tragedy or trauma or disasters. But if you believe in yourself, stick to your principles and values, you bring in smart people, you are persistent and tenacious, just like with the projects I talked about here, the airport and baseball and all those kind of things. You never give up. You may have to make some mid-course corrections along the way, make some slight adjustments, but never lose sight of where you're going. I believe that each and every one of you can become leaders in whatever you choose to do. And it's really all up to you and whether you're willing to take the risk. There's that famous expression that I think, or poem that Teddy Roosevelt talked about. It's called The Man in the Arena. I think if all of you read about it, and the glory goes to the one who gets bloodied and beaten, the one who's in the arena, not to the bystanders who are sitting there like this, watching you in the battlefield. It's the people in the arena fighting, getting knocked down, getting themselves up, who are the real leaders. And that's what I urge all of you to think about as you go on in your lives and whatever you choose to do. Thank you all very much, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have. Thank you. Questions? Who's going to be a leader and ask the first questions? And you want to identify yourself? Feel free.
Hi, everyone. My name is Bryce. I'm from your field here. Obviously. Anyway. So I was just wondering, as you know, Denver has, like you said, become a great city, but how do you balance the needs?
I'm supposed to repeat the question. The question was, how do you continue making Denver a great city at the same time balancing the interests of issues like gentrification and homelessness? You do it by creating balance. And what do I mean by that? There are lots of conflicting interests that you have to deal with as a mayor. You've got on one hand developers who want to develop and develop and develop. You've got people who are concerned about homelessness. You've got people who are concerned about gentrification. And so what leaders do is they bring all the parties together in one room. And they say, we're not leaving this room until we figure out a compromise that takes into account most of the interests of all the parties. No one is going to get what they want or everything they want. But you've got to find compromise. And by the way, each of you, whether you're a developer or an advocate for the homeless or concerned about gentrification, you are all citizens of this city. And your number one priority should be to do what is in the best interest of most of the people of the city and for the future of this city. So you have to urge people to lift their sights above their immediate parochial interest and to think about the broader good. Now that might sound Pollyannish to some of you, but believe me, people are human. Whether you're dealing with a major developer and you start talking to them about what is if we don't have any ordinary people of all kinds living in the city, people aren't going to move here. So your business ultimately is going to fail. If we can't deal with the traffic problem that we have today and start making some modifications, people are going to say, this is, no offense to anybody here from LA, but this is LA, don't come to Denver. And so business people need to understand that by compromising and being part of the public good is in their best business interest. And the same is true for the others, that they have to compromise and understand the perspective of business people and investors, and that know that unless you have investors, cities don't grow. If you don't grow, you die. You bring people together. Let me give you an example. The Cherry Creek Shopping Center. So I won't mention the company, came in and said, we want to redevelop the Cherry Creek Shopping Center. We want to build 3.1 million square feet of office space. And the neighborhoods around Cherry Creek went crazy. They said, impossible. It's going to ruin the community. I brought them all together for about 6 months. I said, we all compromise. We brought it down to 1.1 million. We made improvements for the neighborhood. We made improvements for Cherry Creek North because the small businesses there were concerned that they were going to be inundated or destroyed by the big anchors at Cherry Creek. But we came out with a compromise. It was a great success. In fact, when the companies opened their stores in 1987, I forget the year, they had the highest square foot sales in the history of their companies in Denver, Colorado, at the Cherry Creek Shopping Center. So that's my response. You got to bring all the parties together, get people to compromise, and get them to look to the long-term good and what's in the public interest. Sure. Let me go here and then back there. Yes.
My name is Jada, and first off, thanks so much for being here. Much appreciated. And so you talked about during your tenure as mayor, you mentioned the recession that we were going through as a city, and you brought up a lot of great examples about the shopping centers, the fields, lower downtown, which is all great. But I'm curious to understand more about what were you doing specifically and directly to help people in Denver?
Good question. So the question was, we were doing all these investments in a major recession, but what were you doing for the people of Denver? So the answer is, first of all, to put you in the scenario. The city was dying. The recession we just recently had does not compare to the recession that I had in the 1980s. We had a 2%, our unemployment rate was 2% above the national average. In 1 year, more people left Colorado than came into Colorado. Had never happened before in the history of the state. And I told you about architects left Denver and moved to California. There were no architects in this city. There was nothing to do. So my job was to stop the bleeding, number one. Second job was to make investments to grow the economy, to diversify it so we don't go through these boom and bust cycles that Denver was famous for, and diversify it so we can have more steady. And most importantly, find work and jobs for the people of Denver who are unemployed. Let me give you an example. So I was on a radio program with a gentleman who's no longer doing his radio show, and I made the point that I wanted the labor unions and the contractors to hire people from the Denver metro area. Because when I would go out to the airport and see 10,000 workers building the airport, I looked at the license plates and they're from Wyoming, and no offense to anybody from Wyoming, but they're from all over the state, all over the country, because the union had priorities on who they could allow to work. And I said, wait a minute, this is supposed to help our workers, our people. And on the radio talk show, somebody called me from Wyoming and said, I'm really upset at you. You said, I said, listen, I'm sorry. I'm not the mayor of Cheyenne. I'm the mayor of Denver. This is our airport. We're putting the money into this. We're doing the hard work, and it should help the people of Denver. So I think my biggest challenge was to find a way to make sure all these investments would benefit the average person in Denver so that their incomes could go up and they could participate fully in the economy. And I would say we had mixed results. We had mixed results when it came to that. I wish we could have done a better job. But you're absolutely right. You got to think about, at the end of the day, it's more than buildings and jazzy stuff and all. It's, do these things help the average person, the ordinary person, the average family? And if we're not doing that, then you have to ask the question, well, then why are we doing it? Just to have a big airport? So you can brag you have the biggest airport? So one of the things we had to do was break up the concessions so that the concessionaires could be local businesses. The artwork at DI, most of it is local. I said, if we're going to spend, I instituted a program called 1% of the art. So every building we built, let's assume a building costs $500 million, 1% of it had to go to art. So we said, they've got to be local art. No, we've got to get artists from Chicago. I said, why? We've got great artists here in Colorado. So that was another example of forcing people to think differently and not assume that you have to bring someone from Paris to design something. Hard, but those are some of the things that we did. Good question. Yes, let me go back over here. Yes, sir.
I'm Holden, and I just had to ask with the history that you've had in the company.
I think it's, we're almost out of town, right? Holden asked the question of the day, the elephant in the room, or the donkey in the room, whatever the expression is. Good question, Holden. And that is, what, given my experience and background, what do I think about the current political climate, and in particular the presidential elections? I am very worried about this election. And the reason I'm worried about it is at least twofold, maybe threefold. Number one, we have, and by the way, let me say, when I was Secretary of Transportation and Secretary of Energy, I went to over 30 countries in the world. I negotiated with the Russians on trying to safeguard their nuclear stockpile so terrorists wouldn't get a hold of their nuclear stockpile. I negotiated with people in Europe on all kinds of things, people around the world. So I had a little experience in dealing with international affairs. Today, the world is very complex. You've heard about Putin, and he's flexing his muscles. You've got North Korea. You've got Japan that's trying to fix its economy. You've got terrorist groups, and you got the problem in Syria, the conflicts in the Middle East. It's a very, very complicated world in which we live today. Fact. And the next president of the United States has to understand that and has to understand the nuances of that. Everything is not black and white or green and purple. It's not. There are nuances. There are compromises. You have to understand cultures, other people's ways of thinking. And unless you've traveled and unless you've had those experiences, you're going to walk into a meeting and insult somebody right away. When I went to Saudi Arabia, first of all, I learned, I didn't know this, that the Saudis are very nervous about which hand you use to shake hands. I won't go into details. Very important thing. They have a certain perspective about women, and that women have to wear, full-length dresses and sleeves here. Every culture is different. My point is, you need someone who's president who understands the complexities of international policy and conflict and the repercussions of your decisions. You've got to be thoughtful. You've got to be deliberative. One of the things that I really admire about Barack Obama, people criticize him because he asks too many questions. He tells the generals, come back with another plan. I don't like that one. And they come back with another plan. I have some more questions. He asks a lot of questions. So some people say, you're not forceful. You didn't make a decision. I'd rather have a thoughtful president who is thinking through all the long-term implications, who understands how to play chess. If you make this move, there's this move. And what happens after that move? This move. Where are you going to end up? What's the outcome? What's the long-term game plan? Not the short term. So therefore, I believe you need a president who understands all that. I believe that Hillary Clinton is that person. Number two. You asked me the question, I'm here to give you the answer. Number two, I'm very worried about our economy. Now, I do not agree that our economy is in the dumps. Please. Go to Europe. Go to Japan. Go to the Middle East. Go to South America. Go to Mexico. Go to Russia. Go to China. I've been in China just last year. They don't have 9% GDP growth anymore. It's 3 or 4%. And they're having lots of problems. They're going to have a big bubble. So we're moving along at 2% GDP growth, and everybody's upset. Only 15 million jobs have been created instead of 25 million during President Clinton, but a lot more during Republican administrations. So my question is, who's going to grow the economy? Who understands all the intricacies of the economy? And who's got real solutions? And this notion that all you have to do is cut taxes for the very, very wealthy, and I would benefit from those taxes, I'm against that. I think I should pay. You asked the question about how do we take care of others in the community, right? You make all these investments, but what about the average family? I believe we need to support all Americans. If we don't support the middle class, this economy won't grow. This is a consumer-driven economy. We don't have a manufacturing economy. This is a consumer-driven economy. Who are those consumers? Middle-class families. And if their incomes are not growing and they're not taken care of, they're not buying stuff, and our economy is going to continue to go at 2% or 3%. So it's, people have to understand all that. And I want people to give me solutions. Be specific. When I was mayor and someone asked me how we're going to build the airport, I was very specific. I had to lay out the entire game plan. How are we going to raise $3 billion? Oh, trust me. No. 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 How are you going to get the environmental impact statement? Oh, trust me. How are you going to negotiate with Adams County? That's going to be okay, just believe me. It's going to be great. Now listen, I'm exaggerating, and some of you may be offended by what I'm saying, but I want you to think. I want you to think. When you're presented with complex ideas and someone comes to you with a solution, you want to ask specifics. Well, how are you going to buy that company? How are you going to run that company? We see in my business, people come in, entrepreneurs come in every day with business plans. They want to start this company, and we ask them a zillion questions. We don't simply say, oh, here's the millions of dollars you want, go and build your company. What's your management team look like? What's your business strategy? Who are your competitors? Tell me why your product is so good. Who can take over your product? What's your growth plan? What are your expenses? We ask a zillion questions. We do due diligence. I'm asking you to do the same thing. Do your due diligence. Ask those tough questions and see who has the best answers. In my opinion, Hillary Clinton has the best answers. Okay, next question. Yes, ma'am, over here.
How do you stay honest and transparent as a leader while maintaining your public image?
Wow, that's a very good question. The question is, how do you maintain your transparency and honesty at the same time maintaining your public image? It's really hard. And let me tell you why. When you're elected to a position, whether it's mayor or you're, and Washington is the worst, by the way. You go to Washington, D.C., and then everybody around you tells you you're the greatest. All the lobbyists come in and say, God, you're the best Secretary of Transportation we've ever had. Now build me this bridge. Or give me a route to London, say the airline executives. Or when you're a mayor, you're the best mayor and all that. And then, by the way, I need a contract out at the airport. So the answer to your question is, it's hard. Because I think what's really hard for leaders, whether they're business leaders, and you see this on the part of CEOs, by the way, who get carried away with their own press and all that, and all of a sudden they're not grounded anymore. And you've got to constantly, what I said earlier, be humble, listen to your constituents, whether they're your employees or your consumers or the people around you, listen to your friends. Stay grounded. And that's very hard to do. But stay humble and remember where you came from. I never forget where I came from. My parents are both dead. They recently passed away. I'll never forget the things they taught me. I have their pictures on my desk. I look at them every day. And it reminds me of what they would be thinking of me today. Would they be proud of me today? Or would they say, you turned out to be a son that we didn't raise? I hope the answer is always that they're proud of me. So you got to stay grounded. You got to believe in those fundamental ethical principles that your parents taught you or others taught you, and not get carried away with all the accolades you're going to get and all the things that people say about you. Some of them are going to be true. Some of them are not. But the day that you start believing all that stuff, the next day something crazy is going to happen that you haven't thought about. And you're going to sit there and say, wow, how did that happen to me? I thought I was doing great. Well, you forgot listening to people. You forgot to listen to your heart, to your values. So that's the best advice I have for you. You're welcome. Yes, sir. The question was, given all the things I worked on when I was mayor, what do I think are the next investments, strategies Denver needs to do in order to continue to grow in a balanced way? Number one, we've got to deal with the transportation gridlock of this metropolitan community. What does that mean? Well, we should try different things. We should try using new technology. There are lots of technologies around the world today that we're not using enough of. 3 examples. 1, when you go to the airport and you try to find a parking space in those garages, you drive around and around. There are some European cities that tell you exactly when you move in, drive up to the parking lot, go to level 3, space 34, it's empty. Technology. Eliminate wasted gasoline, pollution, time, energy. Number 2, the biggest reason for congestion on any major highway or street in the country is traffic accidents. Smart cities have figured out a way by creating extra lanes to allow emergency vehicles to get into the traffic, get the accident resolved right away, and get it out, and let the traffic flow. We're not doing a good enough job. We could do a much better job in terms of figuring that out. Number 3, why don't we look at companies that have minivans that can pick up people and take them to a light rail station or take them to downtown? I mean, you have Uber, you have Lyft, but there are other forms of transportation that we can use to move small bodies of people from place to place so that everybody's not in their car creating gridlock. We need more bike lanes. Those are a few examples of things that we can do, but we have to fix this transportation and gridlock problem. Number 2, I think we need to improve our zoning and the way in which permits are granted to major developers. I am a big believer in development. You can tell. Look at the list. But it was always balanced. They didn't get that 3.1 million square feet they wanted to get. They had to ratchet it down. And they did fine, by the way. They made a lot of money. So we've got to find that balance in terms of growth. So if you want to build a structure, do you have enough parking spaces? By the way, how are the people going to get in there? If you take Cherry Creek, there must be 6 structures that are going up in Cherry Creek, right? You've seen them. A lot of them are apartments, and they have some parking, not maybe one-to-one, but they have some parking. Well, the question is, how's all the traffic going to get in? Assuming they can find parking. And how are they going to get out? So we, as a community, need to think in a more balanced, proactive way about how do we balance the interests of developers, the interests of neighbors, the interests of reducing our pollution, reducing the lost time that we waste in gridlock. You know, the University of Texas and A&M have done studies on the hundreds of millions of dollars we lose every year as consumers stuck in gridlock. So we've got to work on balance between developers and aesthetic views of buildings and structures. Make them more people-friendly. You know, I don't like buildings that come up to the sidewalk. When I was mayor, a number of restaurants came to me and said, we'd like to put, you're not going to believe this, tables and chairs on the sidewalk in front of our restaurant. And you know, just like in Paris or wherever, European cities. And some of my public works people said, you can't do that, it's too dangerous. A car's going to hit the curb and run into people. I said, no, let them do it. Make the sidewalks usable, make them friendly. So when you're building something, don't let the building come to the edge of the sidewalk, and then you have a narrow path here. They should be esplanades, like in European cities. You know, where's the vision? Do we have enough growing park space and open space to improve the quality of life to ordinaries? There are lots of people in Denver who don't have money and don't have the time to go to the mountains. They don't go skiing. It costs too much. Maybe they go fishing. For them, a weekend is going to the park and taking your family there and having a picnic. We have to make sure that we provide those amenities for people. So it's all a matter of balance and thinking about where we want to be in 10 or 15 or 20 years. And I think we have to do more of that long-term thinking. So those are just a few examples of things that I would do. Let's go back over here. Yes, sir. Yes, you. I'm sorry.
Okay, so my name is Michael. I asked what you do is either right or wrong.
Right. So the question was, how do you, I'm going to paraphrase it. How do you go about making sure that your opinions, however strong they are actually correct? And at what point do you check yourself to make sure your opinion is not correct? I can only tell you what I do. I like facts. I'm a fact-driven decision maker. And so I first form my opinions based on, I read a lot, and based on the facts that I have before me. And that's what helps me form my opinion. However, and this gets back to the point I made earlier about surrounding yourself with people who are smarter than you are. That wasn't a throwaway line. When people come around you and say, Federico, did you look at this fact? Did you know that X, Y, and Z is happening? And all of a sudden I'm going, no, I didn't know that. Tell me more. So I assimilate new information as I go along. And it could be at some point that I change my opinion. I did that with the airport. I had campaigned as a candidate to build the airport, Stapleton, over the I-70 onto the Rocky Mountain Arsenal, and the entire business community and civic community and citizens thought that's where we were going to go. I changed my mind big time. Not only did we not expand it, we shut it down. We closed Stapleton. Unlike Dallas-Fort Worth that has 2 airports, or Chicago that has 2 airports, a lot of cities have 2 airports. I said, no. I'm not going to ask the airlines to decide where they're going to fly. Are you going to fly out of Old Stapleton or DIA? No. 1 airport for everybody. How did I come to that conclusion? I looked at new information. I realized that to clean up the Rocky Mountain Arsenal was going to cost billions of dollars in probably 10 years. I looked at the fact that we were going to be sued. We'd probably go to the Supreme Court and back 2 times, and that would probably take 6 or 8 years of our time. So I looked at new information, and I said, you know what? It's time to rethink this. So that's what I would encourage you to do. Constantly challenge yourself. Surround yourself with smart people. Listen to new information. And don't be afraid of compromise. Compromise is not a bad word. Who has perfect knowledge? I don't want to see any hands up. So that's my answer. Let me go back over here. Who have I not asked? Young, in the red, well, I was, either one of you.
How have you as a leader built up your successors, and how do we as young leaders build up ours?
The question was, how do I as a leader build up my successors, and how do you as young leaders build yours up? I did the best I could to not only surround myself with very bright people, but to give them decision-making authority and responsibility. And because I did that, they learned a lot. They generated tremendous experience. And one of the things that I'm most proud of is the fact that if you look at a number of leaders today in this community, many of them worked for me when I was mayor. They left my administration and they went on to be city council members. The current mayor was my intern. They're heading major foundations. They're successful business people. So one of my best legacies is the fact that all these people who worked with me when they were very young have gone on and they've done extraordinary things in their lives. And I hope in one small way or another I've inspired them to think outside the box, to aim high, to take chances. And so that's one thing that I would do. What you can do is do the same thing. So a lot of companies today, I require as a board member succession plans. Who's going to replace you in 3 years? All the positions in a company. And some people think, oh, I'm finally the CFO, I'm finally vice president of marketing. No, that's great, you're doing a great job, but if you get hit by a bus, who's going to replace you? Are you training your replacement? So we all have to think about that, grooming the next generation. So I hope all of you do that. Even though you're very young, think about who do you bring along. What high school students are you working with to encourage them to come to DU or to go to college? What mentoring are you doing to help young kids who come from disadvantaged families? To help them think about bettering their lives. I tell you, there's so much joy and pride that you will have when you see someone you mentor go on and become successful in their lives, particularly if they were in a path which was a very negative path. And I can't think of anything that's more rewarding in your life but to build the next generation of leaders So I hope you all think about that and figure out a way to do that. Okay, back up here. Yes, sir. And then, yes. Yep. And are you talking specifically about politics? Okay. The question is, today it seems that, and I'll be very specific, the Congress doesn't know how to compromise. So how do you get people to compromise so they can get things done? And another reality. In my opinion, this is our responsibility, all of us as voters. What do I mean by that? The next time a person running for Congress comes and speaks to you, I want you to ask him this question. Mr. So-and-so or Miss So-and-so, are you going to compromise with the other party? Or are you going to listen to your political leaders and just vote along party line? I expect you to get something done, and that means compromise. Are you going to work with the other side and get things done? If you're not, I'm not going to vote for you. I had a meeting about 3 years ago with a group of very sophisticated business people. Very enlightening. They asked me the very same question. They were frustrated. They were frustrated with our own congressional delegation in Colorado. Forget all 435 members of the House. They said, our congressional delegation doesn't work together. How can we do it? I said, how many of you give them money? All the hands went up. I said, well, this is what you should do. Bring them all in. All the House members, the 2 senators, put them in one room and lock the door. And then say to them, if all of you don't start working together on behalf of Colorado or on behalf of the nation and start to compromise and get things done, we're not going to donate to your campaigns. And you know, one business person told me, can we do that? And it hit me that the average person doesn't understand the power we have as individuals. Of course you can do it. It's your money. Don't give it to the idiots. Demand more. But the same goes to all of us as voters. Demand more of our elected officials. And when they're not behaving and they're not compromising and they're doing the wrong things, vote them out of office. Speak up. Go to their town hall meetings. Tell them you're disappointed in them. Tell them you expect more from them. Tell them you're going to organize a lot of students to vote against them. You'll get their attention. So it's our fault. What percent of Americans vote in presidential elections? Answer. A little higher, a little higher. A little over 50-something percent, right? That means over 40% of Americans don't vote in presidential elections. And we're the greatest democracy on the planet. I have friends all over the world, and I'll never forget one time I was in Europe and having breakfast, minding my own business with my wife, and there was a couple there I didn't even know, and they turned to me and they said, I can't believe you elected that guy president. And you know what? They were right. It's up to us. And if we don't exercise the rights that we have and the responsibilities of being a citizen and a voting member, we only have ourselves to blame. So don't underestimate your political power. Don't underestimate the power of persuasion that you have. I've seen many companies change their behavior because consumers and people stood up and said, we are not buying your product anymore because you did something wrong. By the way, at Wells Fargo, we have a reputation we have to rebuild. It's going to take a long time. But I want you to know we're working on it. We know we made a mistake. So we're listening to people. And all of you have that kind of power. And don't forget it. Use it. Use it. Okay, let's go back over to this side of the room. There was another young lady here. Yes, yes. And then I'll get back to you. Yes. In the green dress. Green jacket, excuse me. Yes, sorry. Or blue jacket. It's you!
So, out of all the things you've done in your life, like civil rights lawyer, working in Denver, your time in Washington, what was the most rewarding and why was it?
Very good question. Of all the things that I've done in my life, what was the most rewarding and why was the most rewarding? The most rewarding thing I've done in my life is helping people. End of story. The reason I enjoyed being mayor of Denver more than when I was in Washington is I could see the results of my work. I could see it every day in neighborhoods where we were doing things to, eliminate graffiti or paving alleys or putting in small businesses or fighting crime or reducing pollution or getting young kids jobs. I visited every school in Denver as mayor, every school, talking to young kids. So the most rewarding thing I've ever done in my life is helping people, and what I said earlier is having people leave my administration and go on to do great things. The frustration I had in Washington was I was distant from people. You couldn't see the work, the result of your work as much as when you're a local elected official, and sometimes it was frustrating. Those rewards wouldn't be seen for years. It took a long time before I finally saw, oh, when I left Washington, and people sent me letters, thank you for what you did, 15 years ago. It finally happened. So Washington's a little more distant from the reality of helping people and serving. You can still do it, but the cause and effect is not as quick as it is when you're a local official. Let me go back to this side of the room. Yes, I'm sorry, there were two of you who had your hands up. Yes, ma'am.
What words of wisdom do you have for people who want to enter public service?
What words of wisdom do I have for people who want to enter public service in the next 5 years or so? Do it. Just do it. Yes.
I'll help you campaign.
Do it with passion. Do it with urgency. As Martin Luther King has said, the urgency of now. Now. Not, I'm going to do this tomorrow or next year. Now. We have so many challenges facing our community, our country, our world now. We need people who are engaged now. Even as students, you can do a lot as a student. Number 3, believe in yourself and aim very, very high. Don't be afraid not to hit your mark. In business, management teams, when they're trying to get their bonus, have goals, and then they have stretch goals. You heard that expression, right? So if you hit your EPS or whatever, you get a bonus, but if you do way beyond what was not expected, you get more. I'm a big believer in stretching your goals, aiming high. And people are sometimes afraid to do that because they think they're going to fail, and I always say, I'd rather aim high and fall short, because even falling short is probably going to be better than what you would have done had you simply aimed normally. So when you enter public service, have grand visions, have great ideas. Don't be discouraged by people who say no. Federico, you can't be mayor of Denver, you're Hispanic. Denver's not ready for a Hispanic mayor, I was told in 1983. You're not even from Colorado, you're from Texas. Who do you think you can run for mayor of Denver? You're not even from... My mother, who was in Brownsville, Texas, used to tell me, I don't understand how you're running for mayor of Denver. If somebody from Denver came to run for mayor of Brownsville, I wouldn't vote for them. You can't believe how many people told me, no, you can't go to law school. Your grades are not good enough, or your SAT score is not good enough. By the way, I didn't tell you the funny story about that. A lot of ironies in life. So years later, when I went to Washington, and I barely was admitted to the law school, I was invited back to the University of Texas to give the commencement address at the law school and at the university, and I'm now a distinguished alumni of the University of Texas. So life is funny. No. Life is funny about how people perceive you. Oh, you can't do that. That's not for a woman. You can't be an astronaut. You're not tall enough. No. When I was mayor, we had height restrictions for firefighters and police officers. If you weren't a certain height, you couldn't even apply. We changed those. So that's what I would urge you to do as you go into program. Just do it. Do it with everything you've got. Believe in yourself. Don't listen to the naysayers. Fight. Be persistent. Be tenacious. Know that things don't happen overnight. They take time and time and time. And sometimes you have to do it 50 times before it's finally done. That's the nature of leadership. That's the nature of hard work. That's the nature of perseverance. But the rewards will be enormous for you. So go do it. Okay, one more question. Over here. Yes, sir.
My name's Rain. What is some common advice that you hear thrown around, or common knowledge that you
Gosh, that's a very good question. The question was, what bad advice or false information is out there that I should encourage you to either disregard or to question? God, there's so many issues out there. I'm trying to, let me think of 2 or 3, okay? One of them for your generation is that your generation is not involved, some people say. Your generation is not going to participate in the presidential election, some people say. Your generation is too altruistic, some people say. Your generation believes in things like global warming, which was invented by the Chinese. There I go again. Some people say. It goes back to the comment I made to this young lady. Believe in yourself. Don't listen to the naysayers. Don't listen to the people who tell you X is Y and Y is X. You know. Do your homework. You're smart. You get it. You got a good gut. Go with your gut. Your gut is usually right the first time. You know? So that's number one. And number 2 is, I know your generation is very worried about the future. Am I going to get a good job? Am I going to get a good salary? How am I going to pay off my student debt? Right? Right? Yeah. Well, here's my answer. Yeah, those are problems. Those are worries. Those are challenges. So what? I had my challenges when I was a young man, graduating from college and law school. I figured it out. I worked hard. I sacrificed. I didn't drive a fancy car. I didn't take great vacations. And when I got married, I put aside money for my kids so they could go to college the day they were each born. Each one. So that when they finally got to be 18, they had money set aside for their college education. How did that happen? I made sacrifices. A lot of my friends weren't doing that. They were taking great vacations. They had nice homes. They had great furniture. They had fancy cars. I didn't have any of that. So come on. You all have problems? I had problems. Deal with it. Okay? Believe in yourself. Work hard. Sacrifice. Persevere. Don't listen to all those people who are saying you can't do these things. You have all these problems. The world's going to come to an end and all that. Listen, when I was a young kid in high school, we were attacking or stopping the Russians when they were putting missiles in Cuba. We thought we were all going to be blown up in a nuclear holocaust. In high school. We were practicing getting underneath our desks. That's how we were taught. You remember? Did you guys do that? Grade school. She was in grade school. Can you believe that? As a young kid, we thought we were all going to die. We had this big nuclear war out in the Gulf of Mexico between the Russians and our Navy. So listen, every generation has its challenges. Every generation has its fears. Every generation has its obstacles. But this country is made of generations who have succeeded, who have believed in our country, who believed in themselves, who believed in this democracy, who believed in the future of this nation. You are now the largest cohort of any cohort in U.S. population. My cohort used to be the largest. Your cohort is now the largest. What does that mean? Well, the facts are you're better educated than my cohort. More of you are going to college than my generation. You're a lot smarter than I am. How do I know? I have 3 kids. One of them's a sophomore in college. The others have already graduated. They are so much smarter than I am, it's scary. And you are too. Put that knowledge to work. Make this country better. Make your lives better. Got to work. It's going to be hard. And by the way, there are going to be a lot of people out there who are perhaps older than you are who say, oh, you can't do that. It's too idealistic. You know, you're smoking something. Not in Denver. Don't believe in them. Don't believe in them. Believe in yourselves. Your generation has extraordinary power. Your generation is going to have economic power, political power, and moral power and ethical power that no other generation has had. When you speak up on moral and ethical issues, people will listen. Whether they're companies or governments or whatever. Why? Because you won't buy their products, you won't vote for them, you'll boycott them, and you'll make them change their ways. Don't ever forget that. Use your power. Put it to good use. Every individual has a vote, every individual has power, and you've got the biggest block ever in the history of our country. Thank you all very much. Congratulations to you. Appreciate it.